Welcome to Programmatic Untangled, New Marketing Institute's monthly podcast. This is the show where we'll be discussing digital advertising's most mysterious topics, from education on programmatic, big data, and audience management, just to name a few. I'm your host, Harry Duran. Join us as we tackle the mysteries of the ad tech industry together. Welcome back to Programmatic Untangled. In case you missed last month's episode, we had our first guest from outside the MediaMath family, Indy Cabra, the National Managing Director at Amnet for Australia and New Zealand. It was a lively discussion about programmatic in the APAC region. Additionally, we released a special bonus episode on our Marketing Engineer program, highlighting MediaMath's recent graduating class of mathletes. Be sure to check those out if you haven't already. This week, we have a wide-ranging discussion on the future of programmatic with the CEO of MediaMath, Joe Zawadzki. MediaMath CEO Joe Zawadzki is a pioneer in the online marketing industry, known especially for establishing the demand-side platform sector. After a decade representing buyers at top-tier agencies and Fortune 500 companies, Joe saw the need to reshape the online marketing landscape by integrating technology, data, analytics, and marketing best practices into a single media platform. He founded MediaMath in 2007, launching a technological revolution with the first demand-side platform, and today, the MediaMath marketing operating system TerminalOne powers the marketing practice of more than 3,500 brands. Previously, Joe was founder, president, and chairman of Poindexter Systems /X+1, incubated Right Media, and as managing member of Occam's Razor, shaped AOL's yield management and DoubleClick's buy-side optimization strategy. His early career was spent as an investment banker, where he developed his expertise in quantitative analysis and market dynamics, and he remains an active New York technology investor whose portfolio includes AppNexus, AdSafe, 33Across, C3 Metrics, Hashable, Accordant, and Spruce Media. Joe holds several patents in the area of online methods for dynamic segmentation and content presentation. He's a graduate of Harvard University and was a teaching fellow in Cosmology, set theory, and the history of science. Joe, I'm curious, of those last three, which one is the best conversation starter?
Yeah, look, I loved the experience in college of sort of being an English major that was asked to teach a class in my senior year that I took in my sophomore year in a core program called Science 18 that was like a potpourri of cool concepts ranging from as read, sort of set theory, cosmology, sort of pop science, taught by this guy, David Laser, who was, I think, a Nobel Prize winning physicist who was like awesome and totally relevant, but still attached to his original thesis and sort of pet theory that was contrasted the hot start theory, sort of the Big Bang, with cold start theory, where the universe was formed from a undifferentiated mass of metallic hydrogen that fractured and created the first race of supergiant stars that then supernovaed and became the raw material for the universe as we know it. And of course, now reasonably debunked by Big Bang, which is sort of the commonly commonly believed origins of the universe. But he plugged it away. So we used to have one sort of chapter of every of each semester sort of was a alternative origins of the universe section, where I was like, oh yeah, this is David Laser's pet theory. He's trying to get the next generation to believe. But it was super exciting to have that sort of very diverse experience of being a student in English and being a teacher in physics, and having a bunch of your classmates in that class, and then having to grade them and whatnot. So it was had to balance a lot of things at the same time, but it was an awesome experience.
Are you a proponent of having people with diverse interests in the same room with you and having this effect of like a rising tide lifting all boats, where they challenge you and see where your ideas are at and allow you to test how wedded you are to your view of things?
Yeah, totally. That idea that there's some you can sort of pull from other disciplines and sort of look at the metaphors or look at the journey of another industry and sort of figure out what's relevant, what can you borrow from, how does this particular domain differ, and how do you sort of have to change those assumptions? But I do find sort of there's a huge amount of richness as you get people from other industries, other disciplines, other backgrounds, other countries, even other native languages. Like all of those things sort of I think add to sort of the richness as you trying to create some tapestry out of sort of many threads. But definitely see that in finance. Like I pretty close to one of my daughter's friends' dads, and daughter's best friend, the guy lives across the street, and it turns out his background is he was like the first of the physics PhDs, astrophysics PhDs specifically, kind of a little bit of RE, to the background, but heard the sort of the siren song of Wall Street, call it 20 years ago now, and kind of led, I suppose a talent drain from Canada, but a whole bunch of physicists and astrophysicists from Canada came down and basically anchored a lot of the quant shops on Wall Street. And so he's kind of lived through this saga of the transformation of finance from what was a lot of the things that we sort of talk about in marketing, but relationship driven, a handful of qualitative ideas, and in some cases a real aversion to automation and to quantification. And what of course you saw over the 2-decade period is the whole paradigm shifted in finance, and if you're not using data, if you're not using technology, it's somehow quaint, and I'd like to mind that as a metaphorical sandbox or garden to basically figure out, okay, like what are the things that marketing may do in terms of how to introduce disruptive change. How do you change the definition of somebody's job? I talk a lot about one of the things that we were looking for at MediaMath in the early days was in the same way that having Bloomberg certification, Series 7, Series 63 basically meant you were employable in the financial industry. It was basically your calling card to your employment credentials, right? It meant you knew how to do the job, and it meant you were appropriately licensed. With the technologies that were, current, in the day. Same thing with us, right? If you have New Marketing Institute, if you're, T1 certified, it means that you have a very rich and bright future in the world of, call it programmatic or data-driven or quantitative marketing. Obviously, it's sort of its own growth area, and you get to look at it from market structure and get to think, okay, well, where's the industry going? Is that how do you take the good parts of a high frequency trading and keep the stuff that doesn't lead to things like financial collapse? It's pretty awesome, and you can do that in almost any industry. It's very fun. I think about marketing too. It's one of these professions that, in order to do it right, you actually have to understand the business underneath the product or the service that you're marketing. You often have to understand the org design. You have to understand their vendor map and their supply chain, and then you get to do this thing that basically has you act as sort of a thoughtful sort of strategic consultant that sort of says, hey, here's how to go from here to there. But then rather than kind of leaving that as a PowerPoint or a brochure or a set of recommendations that you hope that the company implements, and you kind of go off to do the next thing, you actually get to do that. Right. You actually get to implement the code, and you get to sort of build the marketing edifice on top of that recommendation and prove that it works in real life, and sort of iterate and sort of scale it from there. So you end up with this ability to get this diverse sense of how other industries work. You get to come in with a point of view about how you're going to drive those things forward, through marketing and through an ability to sort of connect to customers in real time and gather insights from them in real time. And then you can see the fruits of the labor, whether you're working in retail or CPG or telco or finance. So you kind of get like a, business school education for free, in addition to actually being able to affect change in those organizations through marketing. It's kind of cool if you're into that stuff.
It definitely sounds like you are, though.
Yes.
What I found interesting is as we learned a lot about how these high-speed transactions were happening and what the quants were doing, the idea of instilling really, really small changes, or this idea of the line of sight, where you try to make the connection between where the transaction was initiated and where it was being processed, as short as possible. And the difference was in microseconds, or some measurement of seconds that was less than 1 second. It's really fascinating to know how much that can make a difference. And I'm wondering if you see some sort of parallels with the technology that's being developed in programmatic.
Yeah, no, it's you take the aspirational view of what we're doing, right? And we're trying to, understand the express and implied desires of, human beings and translate them across a really crowded, tapestry of media technology and data companies in order to link it through to what a company is able to build and support and sell. And that thin red line, or sort of that fast path between, what the heart wants and what the world can create, is one version of what we do, right? Sort of outside of the acronym, soup that we create in order to, categorize, but also complicate the job, right? DSPs and DMPs and optimization, algorithmic decisioning, and attribution. And it's like, yeah, those are all incredibly important, ingredients, but the recipe is something that is much more human and much more understandable. Is how do you connect that? How do you connect those dots between cash registers and consumers, and sort of vice versa? Put that way, it just makes for the awareness. There's a lot of work to do, right? There's just so much that needs to get done to see that promise sort of paid off at scale in sort of real life. But then also lets you take, gives you a destination for the sort of the 1 foot front of the other requirement that we have, which is like you literally have to put 1 foot in front of the other and, solve some problem. And then, there's some other problem to solve, or sometimes the thing that you solve begets some other problem. Here I'm thinking about some of the, the work that we have to do around, rationalizing the digital supply chain. Like, we started with things like ad servers, and those were great, but because you had to create a new category and educate people, about being quantitative in their marketing, people said, okay, well, let's create some standard. And you created some standard ad units and banner formats because people wanted to reduce the friction of trade between parties. And like one way to do that is to agree on commodity, and what is an ad unit? And it's 300 by 250. Okay, great. So, at least that it's not going to be a 351 by, 247, right? That's a real problem if people are, coding to their own, to their own specs all the time. And then of course you need something to count, because you've got to evaluate whether, this ad worked or that ad worked, or this placement did or that placement did. And people came up with standard metrics like click-through rates. And then, a lot of cases we're, kind of living with the consequences of some of those original simplifications and original sins. And then you've got to do something else to sort of correct that. So on the, the media side, you kind of move to, okay, let's do these, exchanges. And it's like, well, these exchanges are too open, right? They don't provide the right ability to, reflect somebody's specific business model between an advertiser agency and a media company. So we're going to do these private marketplaces. Well, those are great, but you know what? They require a whole bunch of one-to-one administration, and you're not taking advantage of scale. You're using the plumbing and the technology, but you've introduced this need for a lot of manual human intervention in order to get that to get the plumbing to do what you need it to do. So then of course where we are today, curated markets, it's like, all right, let's take all of the benefits of a hygienic and scalable programmatic supply chain, but layer in the concept of addressability, right? And be able to go and say, okay, we can, from the core and seed of your best customers, let's be able to identify our best prospects. Let's then be able to reach across all of these touch points across display, video, mobile, social, et cetera, billions of times a day, to be able to recognize those people and then, secure privileged access to get them back again. And so each one, very hard to communicate the expressive hand gestures over a podcast, but it's this layering effect where it's like, okay, got to Horizon 1. Now you've got to, either fix what you did in Horizon 1 or take the next, big leap to the next one. But it does mean that we're certainly moving to to a good, happy direction for the industry as a whole. But we're going to be at it for a little while, so strap in.
As a thought leader in this space, I'm wondering if there's moments when you have those moments when you wake up in the middle of the night and you're like, oh my God, I just had this fantastic idea. And if you have any sort of methodology or system for capturing that.
Well, that's funny. It's just yesterday I was in sort of talking about some of the ways to talk about the overall strategy in a way that was straightforward and comprehensible, and sort of gave us credit for sort of ongoing innovation on one hand, but did it in a way that wasn't too complex, too buzzwordy. That is not my skill set. I'm delighted that we have folks like Jen Gold and of course Joanna and Jesse and whatnot in order to to sort of take the complex and make it both compelling and straightforward. But the answer is Evernote, and I was like, hey, can I just share with you my my random scribblings at somewhere between 11 p.m. and 1 p.m. and at varying degrees of sobriety, and I'll just share that with you. You guys can make of it what you will. And that was the answer. So Evernote is my go-to for things like that.
Yeah, I think there's this idea of having what people who are into productivity call their offline brain, because if you don't have a method for capturing it, it sort of it sits there for the rest of the day, and it makes it hard to focus on other things.
And lost thoughts get very stressful.
Yes.
Having this searchable index of both the profound and the banal is remarkably comforting, because it's there, but it doesn't require active storage.
And in preparation for today's call, I was thinking about the idea of how music and video streaming services are really changing the way we consume media. I was thinking about the idea of hybrid and electric cars, which have made the industry, the automobile industry, greener. And I was thinking about how programmatic marketing could be doing the same for the advertising industry in terms of eliminating waste in traditional marketing while still making it accessible. And I'm wondering if that was part of the inspiration for creating the first DSP, which was MediaMath's TerminalOne.
I may have to go reach further back in time, actually, in terms of one of the primary motivators. That is, I really hated the Wanamaker quote. It really, really bothered me that I somehow had ended up in a profession that had a tagline that, the sort of layperson, when they think about marketing, thinks 50% of my advertising dollars are wasted. I just don't know which half. And, if you think about that, it's like, seriously? That's a serious problem, right? It's half your money is wasted. You don't know which, and that's been going on for 105 or 110 years since Wanamaker said it. And it's like, do you not care? Do you think, is that an appropriate tagline for a century, right? For a modern practitioner to put it up as the opening slide to their to their conference talk, and it made me feel a little bit ashamed. That was sort of the moniker for the life's work, basically. So said, look, you can either accept it or you can sort of do something about it. And I suppose set out to do something about it.
Well, the thought that comes to mind is this idea that everyone had about Bannister and the 4-minute mile, right? Because, well, no one's ever going to break that, and it can't be done. And so that's
a great point.
We live with that, and that's how it's going to be until it's done. And then, whatever it was, weeks later, everybody's breaking it. It's just like a mind shift.
No, that's exactly right. It's part of the said this before, but sort of part of the job is to be less wrong in shorter periods of time. Right. So you can get out there and say, here's how technology and math will transform the world of marketing. But, sometimes it takes a couple decades to sort of get that to actually happen in real life. And it's got to be pleasantly persistent, I think.
Do people tend to use those two phrases in the same sentence, like programmatic and green? Is that happening more? Are you seeing that?
It's a good question. I do think there's a first order higher purpose to programmatic, right? Or to, smart marketing, maybe in general, which is, the world's, it's very busy now, right? And a whole bunch of the incoming assumptions about how the world works and the role of marketing and whatnot, I think are being upended for a whole host of reasons. One, I think the physical process of going from thought to deed, of creating a new product or creating a novel service, and then being able to distribute it, sort of pick, pack, and ship if it's a physical product, or use the internet for distribution of a online service or whatnot. That thing just sort of changes the manufacturing process, the product design, development, distribution, et cetera. And then, for consumers, on the human beings on the other side of that, it becomes it is the paradox of choice, right? There are, the real life experiment of, give people a discount for jam when they walk into a store. And if they see a table with, 17 different jams from, boysenberry through, strawberry rhubarb and everything in between, the chances of conversion are X. And you show a stand where there are 4 choices, and there's grape and regular old strawberry and marmalade, and there are only 4. Chances of conversions are like 2 to 3 times that people get overwhelmed by sort of the decision making process. And the idea that quantitative marketing can really connect those 2 dots, right, of what people want and need, whether they know it or not today, and again the full bevy of things that the world can has created or could create in order to sort of fill that unmet need, is kind of the point of this stuff at scale. And so I think that is one of the sort of higher purposes, just kind of making the engine of the economy work better, and paying for free internet and all the things that it actually really does. I think we have a second order opportunity or obligation in sort of where we are now. Call it a decade into programmatic, and maybe 2+ decades into digital in general. And that's like do the harder thing, right? Start reinventing for the long term. I think, put not just the advertiser and the publisher and sort of the ingredients in between as the sort of a primary set of people to satisfy and sort of goals to drive, but remember the consumer and, put them first. And not just for today, but for for the next generation, and not just in the U.S. but on a global basis, and to have the power to do good. And then you think about, well, what are some of the local opportunities to do that? And you start thinking, well, really is about fraud, and it's not human traffic, and it's about not rewarding fake news, and not sort of not empowering an ecosystem of bad actors in between that are sort of siphoning the or taxing the programmatic ecosystem with malware or with fake ads, or, on the advertiser side as opposed to the content side. And I think that's it's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing, to be able to sort of turn the machinery that we built and really focus on doing the right thing. And whether it's MediaMath.org, whether it's the work the New Marketing Institute is doing with a lot of the industry associations, IB, DMA, and then their sort of global counterparts. But I'm sort of excited that we've kind of reached the level of maturity that you start thinking that way. It's less about us and more about the broader industry that are coming along with us and helping us go forward. So it's exciting. It's exciting that we're here.
I get the sense that the folks who are really going to be the true marketing leaders in this space are the ones who are actually taking that approach and really looking at it from a holistic point of view and understanding, not getting into it for the short-term gain, and really thinking about building this long-term relationship with the consumer and what's in it for the best, not only for the consumer, but for the community as a whole. And I think at the end of the day, the companies that do that are the ones in this new age, I feel like they are going to get the most attention, are going to have the most success.
Preach, brother. I agree.
A lot of the leaders are embracing omni-channel advertising because they're looking to create these connected experiences because they want to drive better results. Why do you think they need to do that, or what can that be attributed to?
I think it's a collapse of the barriers to doing what's super obvious from a marketer's perspective, right? If you naively, as a human being, said, how do I feel about Nike? Right. And, the experience of the brand Nike is made up of a sum of all of the historical touch points and, ads that you've seen on television or, Facebook ads, or times you walked past a Foot Locker and saw the swoosh in the window, and like all of that sums to create a perception of a brand, and ultimately your sort of relationship with it. Are you buying their products? Are you buying their their fuel wristband? Are you is it working for you? Do you like the celebrity endorsements that they sort of bring to bear? Do you like the story of the of sort of what they're promoting? And that's of course what as you go into a marketing department, you're like, of course, that's like, I want to have a relationship with a customer, and I want to know who they are from the first time I've ever met them, and they've never first time they're buying their first pair of shoes. My son going to Jackrabbit, super excited to be at a store that only sold adult shoes, right, from Tip Top Kids right across the street in 72nd. And like that experience for him was like kind of exciting. He got to pick his own shoes, and he got to pick the grown-up selection. And then to be Nike and to be able to start that relationship with somebody that over the course of a life might buy 4,000, about 300, pieces of, clothing and shoes and whatnot. And then, then you get into a marketing department, at least historically, and you have to deal with the realities of, well, this is the way we manage our display budget. It's this agency, and the way we do our search is with Marin directly into Google, and our social is managed by our PR agency. And then of course our TV budget is over there. And I'm only responsible, to be clear, for acquisition, and I'm focused on sort of net new customers or sales. The retention and the customer loyalty department is way over there, and I know that some of the things we're doing aren't totally on strategy for them, or we're acquiring full freight customers that are likely to attrit and go back to Reebok, but I'm doing it anyway because that's what my goal said. And absent sort of a standardized, normalized, data and software infrastructure, you're kind of left in that world where the process of marketing is divergent from the human intuition that brand wants to connect with a human being across all screens, over all touch points over time. And if you could think of it that way and sort of carry on a journey and carry on a conversation that was stateful and persistent, you as a marketer, as a living breathing person, that conforms with how you think about the world, right? From the other side of you sort of being a consumer and a customer. And yet, because of the way that we got here, very much sort of initial conditions, you couldn't do that. And so you had this constant cognitive dissonance of like, yes, this is a good idea, I just can't do that. Like the level of effort is way too high, and therefore I'm going to do what I've always done, and X, Y, and Z. And so I do think the big promise of a lot of what we are doing here, and I'll generalize to say the whole industry that's sort of active now, is to make what's obvious true. Right. It's just to take the thing that makes sense, and call it the Holy Grail, call it the regular intuition, but just to make that now possible. And first with code, and second with sort of ecosystem connection, and sort of galvanizing that community. But then overall starting to work on incentives, starting to work with org design, starting to remove some of those artificial silos that we built up for ourselves because we had to get on to the real work of like making that direct connect between consumer and brand.
Well, you touched on TV, and I know that programmatic TV has been touted as the next wave. I'm wondering what your thoughts are. Are we getting ahead of ourselves?
No. It's of course. There's nothing magical about the 40-inch Samsung screen strapped to a wall that makes it different than a desktop or a mobile device, or a billboard in a stadium or the like. You have the opportunity to take that larger palette and fill it with whatever you want on a real-time basis, on an individualized, personalized basis. And if you can, to think that you won't is insane, right? Technology tends to democratize, and it tends to be that people, it's in the realm of the possible, they eventually get around to doing it. TV has been a little bit of a more, historically, it's been a more interesting beast because of some of the technical infrastructure in terms of, how cable was distributing things, and, how it went from national to local markets, and how the upfront process, worked, and the ease of it, the ease of transaction in that world. And for a long time, I think TV was deemed not broken, right? It was the reliable way to get mass reach. It was the, jet turbine of demand, the big red go button that if you were launching your P&G new Tide with bleach formulation and you had to keep it at the eye level of the Walmart shopper in the sort of the detergent area, you had a very critical fortnight in which to do that and sort of maintain the sales velocity that would keep Walmart keeping it there, as opposed to relegating it to kneecap high, or ultimately removing it from the store. And so TV was just, you could just do that, and you could do it reliably. And of course, what's been happening over the years is that that reliability has been challenged, right? Again, we as human beings are consuming more and more content across more and more, diverse channels first. of course, have been doing it on multiple devices and getting a lot of that from, the YouTubes or the Daily Motions or what have you, all the way through to, watching TV somewhat passively, right? While, really being active on the second screen, the tablet, sort of in bed or on the couch. And so, you as a marketer starting to look, that's shaky. That's not quite as reliable and effective as it once was. I don't quite have a BATNA. I don't have an alternative yet. And I think cannibalization is hard, right? So, because that thing has largely worked for industry, participants, that it hasn't felt as important to sort of creatively destruct and to sort of reinvent. And I think what we are seeing now is, in addition to the continued erosion of the, effectiveness of television, is a sort of commensurate increase in people's appreciation for digital done right as a way to get, efficient and effective, scalable, reach that drives real outcomes. And, those lines are dangerously close to crossing for the majority of marketers, that they're like, I get it. I have to evolve out of this thing. In the same way that publishers a lot of times were like, yeah, I got a pretty good digital sales team. I'm making enough money. It's still digital dimes. It's not quite analog dollars, but it's pretty good. And then mobile happened, right? And mobile didn't have the same extant monetization for a lot of publishers, and therefore they had to get to solving for it really, really quickly. I think TV is going to have the same thing, right? Where I like to joke about the. Have you guys heard the Turkey Professor before? I have not. I think I use it. Turkey Professor is the beginning of the year, well-trained Turkey professor says, well, look, I'm looking in March and I'm looking in June, and I'm seeing the population of turkeys, consistently rise, day over day, week over week. And I think pretty soon the turkeys are going to populate the world. And and then Thanksgiving happens.
Yeah.
Every year. And lo and behold, things have to change, things change quickly. Yeah. And, that's kind of where we are right now, is people, I think, appreciating that the sort of reliability of some of the, the mass reach vehicles are challenged at the same time that alternatives of sort of mass targeted are catching up and passing. And therefore people are kind of ready now to make the big move of sort of cutting over and, moving the stuff that we're doing here from sort of experiment or parallel process to become the primary or principal process, and then fold some of the mass, less targetable, less personalizable channels as a way to augment the core strategy of personalized one-to-one programmatic approach to marketing. So good for all of us, I think.
You mentioned this idea of the realm of the possible, and it makes me think about what's coming online with AI, and tools like Watson. And I'm wondering how you think about those, and if there's some sort of risk assessment of using an external tool or building algorithms in-house.
Yeah, look, I think I'm excited about the concept of both, right? It's always nice to be first and to do the whole, media is going to need math to be effective. And, then people are say, well, that's interesting. I'm sure that it is, but I got other stuff to do, right? And then, you march forward 10 years and you look at what's happening just in general, right? You think about, the Bill Gateses and the Elon Musks, and, they're lean forward with AI, and you think about what machine learning has done in, sort of the conquering of even just games that people thought were unsolvable, right? Checkers is one thing, even chess, a sort of zero-sum game. And then you take Go, and then you take now no limit poker, and all of these new barriers are being sort of overcome by by AI, and then just take that and generalize it everywhere. I mean, how your Uber shows up at your door, and they start doing predictive modeling to make sure that the Uber's summoned before you actually need it, because there's either a high concentration of people in a particular area, or because it starts to appreciate that, you always leave the house between, 7:40 and 7:55, and therefore they'll have a car generally in the area about when you need it. And you start seeing sort of AI sort of everywhere. And I think it's led to the appreciation for a lot of marketers that marketing will be and is no different. That it too needs software, it too needs machine learning, it too needs data, and not as buzzwords or concepts, but as sort of an integral part to how we all do our jobs. And then once you're there, you're like, look, how do you make kind of make a marketplace of algorithmic approaches? How do you encourage people to get comfortable with it by providing lots of alternatives? How do you let people roll their own and sort of bring their own algorithmic suite to bear, where they're receiving the data, they're mixing it with their sense of who their best customers are and what their true goals are, and then spitting out instructions for a machine to go execute at scale. And so I'm a huge believer that we built something here that is built over a decade, multiple versions, lots of laps around the track, and really purpose built for the problem at hand. But to think that this is the only answer, and to not avail oneself of alternative approaches. Watson was talking to a guy that that's there now, and he likened Watson, I thought was super interesting. He's like, I'm not sure about its effectiveness, from a bidding perspective, like a response modeling perspective, right? May well be great, right? We're doing some work there now. But what would be really great at, if you thought of Watson as the smartest English major who's read the most books and the most content ever and could speak intelligently about it, like think natural, language processing or even, natural language generation, being able to mine real insight out of unstructured data, boy, that Watson is really great at that. It's like, all right, well, what marketing problems can we solve with that ability? And it may not be show ad 427 to user ID 37248R. It may be like, tell me something descriptive, inform the creative, tell me the message that needs to show up there based on how I've interacted with the brand or media over time, and kind of use each algorithm for the purpose that it's best fit for. And ultimately, create a multiple algos that all do their part to create a better experience for the consumer and a better outcome for the brand, and embrace all that sort of innovation that comes from a really burgeoning area of sort of big data, machine learning in marketing, not as theory but as practice, like for real. And that's where we are right now.
You mentioned header bidding as you're talking about AI, and it's actually one of the more technically sophisticated types of programmatic advertising, and we touched upon it a little bit in episode 2 at MediaMath's CMO Joanna O'Connell. It's grown in popularity with publishers, despite the challenges, right? And I'm wondering why it's been so popular, what you see in terms of continuing to grow, or is it going to plateau?
Yeah, so what is header bidding? Let's maybe start there. What has it done? It's basically taken a pretty old school concept, right? The idea of a tag on the page that was able to score that page or score that impression and offer back a price at an advertiser may have dated back to like Fox Interactive Media 15 years ago. Arguably the first. I mean, certainly at X+1, our sort of passback network was effectively in fact a header bidding solution, right? You'd JavaScript on page, you'd score the impression, you'd keep the ones that you wanted, you'd pass back the rest to the deep chagrin of the publisher, who then had to figure out what to do with it after you gave it back. But the concept has been around for quite some time. What's happened in the past couple of years, I would say, is outside of the reasonably well manicured sort of garden or waterfall that the DFP through to one or more ad exchanges and SSPs through to a bunch of demand side bidders against that. What header bidding has done is basically said supply is no longer constrained to that waterfall, and that if you want to look at and be able to bid on 100% of a publisher's inventory, all it takes is one little tag on the page. And of course that quickly leads to a slippery slope, because if one is good and two is better, you get to 12 or 13, and each one is sort of adding some incremental bit of demand, but at the same time it's yet another tag on the page with respect to where's the data going? Is it slowing down the consumer experience? Am I truly getting incremental dollars? Am I simply shifting it from one place to another? But what it's led to from a buyer's perspective is, really the ability to, look at the full totality of the impression opportunities that are out there, sort of across the board, right? 100% of sort of inventory. And of course, that's deeply compelling. So it's kind of leading to this, yet again, a layering of, tech and partners, and it's becoming kludgy, right? It's becoming fraught with, tags and redirects and everything else. The market's craving for some simplification, right? It's one of these, like, every short-term decision is good, but the long-term answer is bad. And that's always, dangerous, especially when you see it coming, right? Especially when you're on the other side of it. It's like, ooh, this next step is good. This next step is not. It's taking me over the edge. But every step is logical until you jump off the cliff. And I think there is a reckoning or a rationalization that needs to come where you've sort of created deeper connections, whether it's the long vaulted consolidation or if it's just through partnership and product integration, but to create sort of a next generation of this infrastructure that has the benefit of hindsight. Right. So, how we got here was one step in front of the other for 20 years as an industry. And I think where we can get now, given the size of the market, given the clear tailwinds for the industry, given the maturity of the, the market and the ecosystem and the demands from both advertisers and publishers and everything in between, is to rationalize, is to reset, is to say, okay, if you were starting blank slate and you had the following conditions, how would you design for the future? And it may not be that header is one of them. And so, I think that's kind of where we are now is, continue to expand on and in some ways sort of torture what is, to sort of get to the, to the next phase, but, to buy ourselves the, luxury and the opportunity, to kind of rethink as a, as an industry and as a class. And, we'll be doing both those things, I think, for, another call it 3 or 4 years. You're kind of be living in this sort of intermediate state. But I look forward to the, happy future. Let's set a target, shall we? Let's just do 2020 because it's a, nice round number and it's a mere 3 years, stone's throw away. But to make sure that we enter that, that century or that decade rather with a rethought view of how all this stuff should work for real at scale.
Makes a lot of sense. Seems like we could talk about that for hours just on that topic.
I hope we will, actually. This is super fun.
Well, I want to thank you, Joe, for taking the time to come on the show. There's definitely a lot to talk about, and we'll look for an opportunity to bring you back. So this is the point of the conversation where we had to wrap up. And as you can probably tell, this is a topic that Joe is incredibly passionate about, and I'm sure we could have talked for hours. We'll definitely be looking for an opportunity to bring him in on a future episode. For more information, don't forget to head on over to programmaticuntangled.com. You'll be redirected to all our current episodes. Each month we publish a detailed show notes page with highlights from the interview along with any links mentioned. Tune in next month for another engaging conversation with a programmatic marketing thought leader.